So we're recording. You can go from the door to about right there.
All right. I've never been anyone, no one's ever told me I needed a microphone for my big mouth, but for our video to make sure the sound gets to it good enough. Good to see everybody this evening. A couple of new faces, and it's great to have you with us. Got a lot going on tonight, and so whether you remembered or not, tonight is our officer election tonight, and we're going to go through that as quickly as we can. We are, if you can't tell already, we're a pretty laid-back group, and it might not be done in a official parliamentarian procedure, but we will get the job done. So just a couple of things going on here before we get started with everything else. Just kind of update on things that are going on, things that have been going on. I want to thank everybody who helped out at the expo. I guess that was last weekend, the week before. We had a tremendous response to that. It was the Ozark Homestead Expo done during the time of the county fair, and it was their first year to ever do that in Benton County, and so, well, at least at the fair. And so traffic seemed to stay pretty steady of people coming in and out, and we got to talk to a lot of different people, and the way it kind of paid us off in the end was we have 19 people who signed up for our beginner class just from the expo. And so we're at about 35 or so, close to that, total for our class this Saturday. And so we're pretty excited. So we weren't sure exactly how everything would go over, since it's kind of last minute. It was only about a week for people to put on their calendars for the class, but we had 9. The way we did the classes this time was $75 if you wanted all the materials. As you can see, we're getting ready for the class over here. If it comes with the book, we're giving them a hive tool and a meal for lunch, and so we charge $75 for all of that, and so that was different than we've ever done before. We didn't know going up that much with the cost from what we had done before. Of course, we've never provided any of this other before. What that would do, and we have about the same size classes we've had the last 2 or 3. So it didn't seem like that's going to be a big issue. But out of that, for $75, you also get a year membership that's included with the club. And then there were 3 others that wanted to get the class and all the materials with no membership. And then we're only charging $70 for any, $20 for any additional add-on. So if a husband and wife come, they don't have to pay $75 or $60 for both of them. We wanted to make that better for them. So it turned out really good. We're looking forward to this weekend. Saturday will be from about 9 in the morning till about 3 or so in the afternoon. And so if you are a member and you just want to pop on by and sit in for a little while, get to know some of the potential new beekeepers, and chances are some of you will end up being mentors for some of the new beekeepers that come through. So be ready for that as well. But that went really, really well. The class that's this Saturday, remember next month, November, We don't have a regular meeting in November. We do a club potluck meal, and so that'll be right here next first Thursday of next month on November 4th. And then on the 6th, we have moved this. This was the last Saturday originally scheduled in October. We had to bump it a week. And so on November 6th will be a field day, and that's going to be for, that's members only. We're going to spend time tonight talking a lot about preparation for winter prep. But we're going to actually be making fondant and candy boards and things like that. So if that's something that you'd like a little bit more information about, or you just want to come join and make some fondant and candy boards with us, then everybody will go home with some so that you have some to be able to use as we get going into winter. And that brings us to officer elections. Like I said, we're going to try to make this as quick and as painless and as simple as we possibly can. I have actually, when I was elected, we didn't have a meeting. I was in the middle of all the COVID stuff, and so we weren't meeting then. And so I have yet, in the previous year to that, I was gone during officer elections, and I have yet to be physically present to an officer election of Benton County beekeepers. And so I had to talk to Sean earlier today and say, how do we do this? I don't even know. So if you have, we have had a couple of names of people who have gone ahead and submitted their names. Some are not with us tonight ahead of time. They were interested in serving. But if you have been a member for at least a year and been around the club for at least a year, then you are eligible, according to our bylaws, to serve on the board in some capacity. And so if that's something that you would be interested in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start going through these. I will announce who the incumbent is, who is currently running, and basically, unless that person says, I don't want it, then if there isn't anybody else who is interested in that position, then they will just automatically continue on with that unless somebody has an objection and wants to replace somebody, or I guess wants to impeach somebody for some reason, then speak up and we'll take care of it. But as I go through each one, if it's something that you would like to run for and be a part of, raise your hand, and then we will vote if there is more than one person that is nominated. So we're going to start with our members at large. The first member at large, right now, Kevin Collins is one who is serving as member at large. So is there anybody who would like to run for the number one member at large spot? It's not a voting member of the board, but you are involved in decision making, you are involved in planning, you are involved in, you join us quarterly in our board meetings, and so you are a part of that. So if there's anybody going once.
I think Kevin said he was interested in staying.
Who?
Kevin, JJ and Kevin Collins said he was interested in
Okay, he's interested in staying?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody want to run against Kevin? Going once, going twice. Then I need a gavel. I say that every week. I need a gavel. I just want a gavel. That just makes me feel important. Yeah. All right. So we'll say any opposition to Kevin Collins serving as. All right. And Kevin Collins will be our number one member at large. Our second member at large currently is J.R. Curtis. J.R. is here with us this evening. I haven't heard him say that he doesn't want to do this anymore. So I'm going to assume that I'm going to nominate him. He's nominated to run. So anybody want to take that position and run for that position? All right. Then we will say that J.R. Curtis is our member at large number 2. We have had our event coordinator has been Patrick Edwards. He has told us that he is more than happy to step down out of that position. We have one name that has been put forward, and that's my wife, Jenny. If you have not met her yet, she's sitting back there with Miss Jamie at the table. And so she I twisted her arm to run and help out, but if there's anybody else who would like to be involved with some of the event planning and that type of thing, would like to run for that position, then is there anybody else who is interested in doing that? All right. Then, do we officially need to vote if somebody has not actually been voted in? Let's do it. Just make it official. If you are in
By
favor.
acclamation, don't you?
What's that?
You just put them in by acclamation, don't you?
My executive order, right? So we will then recognize Ms. Jenny Schinnerer as our event coordinator. All right. Yeah. All right.
She does know that's a lifetime contract, right?
She does. She does now.
Good.
All right. Our treasurer, Brad Dexter, has been our treasurer this last year. Brad is interested in continuing to do that work as well, but if there's anybody else who would like to step into that position, then if you'd like to do that, raise your hand, let me know. That was not my hand going up. I do not want to be treasurer. All right. If there is no one, then we will officially say that Brad is our treasurer for this year as well. All right. Miss Jamie Rogers is our current secretary and has been secretary now for just 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 4th year. I know that if anybody would be interested, she would be happy to have somebody run against her, but we'll open that up. Is there anybody who would be interested in? We probably should have job descriptions and everything else out so people know what all's involved.
Those change,
They're fluid. Yeah. You of all people know that better, as good as anyone. Anyone else interested in the secretary position? All right. Then we will continue to recognize Miss Jamie Rogers as our secretary for the new year. Sorry, Jamie. All right. Mr. Sean Rogers, her lovely husband, is, I don't know if anybody has ever actually called you that before. Another man probably has never called you that before. He has been serving as our vice president for, is this 2 or 3 years? 4 years? 2 years?
Well, same time you have, it was 2019.
So for a while. He's been doing it for a while. Anybody else interested in running for the VP position? All right. Mr. Sean Rogers, recognized as our VP. And currently myself, Steve Schinnerer, I am currently serving as president. If there is anyone else who would like to step up and oppose me, anyone at all, I won't be a tough candidate to run against. That's all right. I enjoy the work. I enjoy what I've been able to do and getting to know all of you, and I would be honored to continue to serve if there is no one else who want to do so. So, here we go. All right. Well, that was easy. easy enough. So y'all start working on your campaign for next year, and start raising all your campaign funds and everything. So, all right, let's get into our topic for the night. I'm gonna wait for you to. Are you going? Okay. Our topic for the evening is dealing with winter prep. And I'm going to kind of go through as much of this as I can, as quickly as I can. And of course, with each one of these things we're going to talk about, there are 50 more things that can be said. And so I'm also, if you at any time have a question, don't wait to the end. Just raise your hand, ask a question. If any of you have any suggestions, any other ideas, anything that you have done, some of you are more experienced, you have other things that you have done in addition to what I have here, then don't hesitate to let us know as well. It just makes it all the more better for everyone else, especially our newer beekeepers. So this is, going into the winter, this is the most stressful time period of the year for our bees. There are multiple stressful times, but when it comes to actually surviving, the winter time is that time. And bees are the only insect that create a self-sustaining microclimate for themselves. There is no other insect that does this. Honeybees are unique. And in doing so, there are a lot of different factors that go into their survival. Primarily, main factor hinges on what type of a winter that we have. This last winter wasn't too bad of a winter until all of a sudden we got a freeze late in the winter, and a lot of beekeepers lost a lot of bees. And so it just kind of depends on the weather. And that wasn't just beekeepers. I can guarantee you there are a lot of feral bees in the wild that were also lost due to all the dramatic climate changes that are going on. What you need to know is that even if you take the minimum steps to prepare for winter, it makes a big difference. Just doing nothing, you're probably going to end up with problems. But if you even do just the minimum preparation steps and getting ready for it, it will help a lot. And so let's talk a little bit, especially for those that are newer beekeepers, what exactly is going on in the hive? And we kind of start in the hot summertime, where even when it gets to its hottest at about 100 degrees of the ambient temperature around your hives outside, the brood rearing slows down. It doesn't completely stop, but the queen does slow. If it gets to a point that gets so hot, there's a need for water to be put out for them to be able to make sure that they're able to maintain a cool environment in the hive. Hopefully, you're aware within the brood chamber itself, around the brood itself, the colony is going to keep a 93 to 95 degree temperature year round. That's going to be if it's 110 degrees outside, or if it's minus 10 degrees outside. Their job is to keep that temperature maintained. Now that is when there's brood present, and even in the middle of the winter time, the queen will continue a lot of times to maintain a very small brood, but not always. There are some times that she will stop for a while. If there is no brood at all, they have found that the cluster will actually allow the temperature to cool a little bit of the entire cluster to about 85 degrees. Saves energy. They don't have to use as much fuel for the honey in their hive to do that. And so it's just a way for them, if there is no brood, they will cool down a little bit, but still 85 degrees is still pretty warm. At about 65 degrees, this is when they have determined, for the most part, I don't think this is every single time, but in general, when queens will not fly. That would be a virgin queen, if it's that cool or cooler, she's beginning to get to a point to where she's not going to want to go out on a mating flight anymore. Queens leaving with swarms, if it drops down to this temperature or cooler, are not going to do very well as either. And so it's another kind of marker on our thermometer as temperatures continues to drop. At 61 degrees, this is where they have determined that drones no longer able to fly. They are just not able to get out and do what they need to do. And so kind of makes sense around the same temperature when mated queens aren't flying, drones stop about the same time too. Yes, sir.
Steve, are these temperatures the high for the day or a median temperature, or?
I would say probably a high for the day. If you're only getting to this temperature during the day, I mean, if you're cool in the evening, and then here in Arkansas, we get to be 20 degrees overnight and then 70 degrees the next day. And so we know, we've seen, those have had bees for a while, we've seen the bees and how they're reacting on those warmer days. So I would say this has to be, and this is all coming from Tom Seeley and some of all his research. And so I would have to say that if you're only getting to a max of this temperature, then that's what's going on. At 57 degrees, this is when bees begin to start forming their clusters. So we've had some 57 degree and lower nights already. So our bees are already starting to cluster some, at least at night. When it warms up during the day, they're going to spread back out for the most part. But 57 degrees is when that begins to happen. Brood rearing, it says brood rearing stops, but I know that it doesn't always necessarily completely stop. At times there might not be, queen might not be laying for a while when it's super cold, but it does slow down. Now, this time of year even still, we're seeing our brood get smaller and smaller and smaller, and as they begin to prepare to put as much of the comb in use for storing food to get through the winter. And so at 42 degrees, bees are not able to fly. Now, if you have your hives that are facing, the entrances facing south or east, and they get early morning sunlight, and it's 40 degrees, 42 degrees outside, you say, well, my bees are flying. Well, they're getting help from direct sunlight that's helping them warm up to be able to fly. But at 42 degrees, if it is just 42 degrees, they are not able. Bees, when they are cold and they are getting ready to go into flight, they will begin vibrating the same muscles that they either use for their wings for flight, same muscles that they use in the cluster to warm up the cluster in the hive. They start vibrating those muscles to warm up. If it's 42 degrees, they're not able to get them warmed up enough to fly, and so they are. They'll be stuck. That's also, even maybe the sun helped warm them up a little bit, and they took off. And in the wintertime, especially if you have snow on the ground, you go out, you'll see some bees laying out on the snow. They may have been out maybe trying to collect water from the snow or something along that line. And when they land and they get in that cold snow, they immediately cool down to where they're too cold to be able to fly. And so a lot of times you'll see some bees, some dead bees that are out there in the snow. Sometimes, heard of some people who have taken those bees and they'll take them inside and let them warm up, and they'll start flying again because they're not completely dead. However, why, more experienced beekeepers, why might that not be a good idea? If you have bees that have left the hive, and even if they're laying in the snow, to take them in and warm them up to save your bees, why might that not be a good idea? Well, that's one thing. You don't know what hive they came out of. What is one reason that some bees, especially in the wintertime, leave? Is a lot of times it's for sickness. Sometimes when a bee is ill, they've got a virus, they've got some kind of bacteria, there's some illness, they will leave the hive to protect the rest of the colony. And so you don't know if maybe those bees were ones that were leaving because they felt that there was something that was not right, and I'm going to reintroduce that back into my hive. Every winter on Facebook, I see posts of people that are saving their bees and taking them back to their hives, and that's not necessarily a good thing to do, because they know what they're doing, and they leave when they know they need to, and so that's something to just kind of keep in mind. 40 degrees, if it gets 40 degrees or below, then bees that are by themselves, not in a cluster, will not survive. And so that's just kind of a baseline temperature for bees that are alone by themselves. Here's kind of a depiction of what's actually happening inside your hive. You've got the cluster, which is kind of just the circle, the black line circle in the center. That's the cluster of bees that are in the hive. Now, what's been going on is they started down here in the bottom. And as they work their way across the frames and work their way up the frame, eating the honey, and all this down here, all the honey is gone, it's empty. And they've made their way up here into this area. They're making their way up into the top box now, if you have a second box. And you can see even in the middle of that box, they're starting to empty the cells of honey as they're eating, as they're moving around. And so they are moving constantly through the hive, back and forth, working their way up and eating that honey as they go through. So our goal is to try to make sure they have enough food that's there for them to make it from the time we close them up for the last time in the beginning of the winter and open them back up in the spring. And this is, again, some of Tom Seeley's work. One of the things that Tom Seeley brought out in some of his research was that you don't have to be so concerned about the bees keeping the whole hive warm, because they're not. What they're doing is just mainly keeping around their cluster warm. Now, obviously, if you pop the lid off, you're going to release any heat that is stored up in that hive. But primarily, the heat that they are generating is just being stored and conserved around the cluster. And so he did several tests on that to see if you have a big hive, is it harder for them because they have more of a room in the hive to heat up? And he found that it didn't make any difference, according to his research. But those are kind of the numbers. The bees in the middle are the ones that are protected the most, if there is brood, the center will be kept around that 93-degree point. Those around that are what we call insulating bees that are keeping that heat inside. And then there are the bees on the outside that are shivering, also producing more heat. It'll be around 41 degrees on the outside, which is a good temperature to be, because at 40 degrees, then that becomes dangerous for the bees. And so they try to maintain that around 41 degrees. I also learned today, if you have not read the book, I never remember the titles. It's Tom Seeley's latest book. I want to say All About Bees, or he deals with everything in general. He has one that's about swarms. He has several, but there's one that is just about bees in all different. What's that? The Lives of Bees. That's it. In that, he talks about the area of a bee itself, the size of a bee. And when bees go into a cluster, the bees actually are able to shrink their bodies to a third of the regular size. And that helps them also just be more compact, makes it better insulated, keeps all that. And it's just the way that they were designed to do that is incredible. But he mentioned it was 67% body size decrease when they are in a cluster. I'd never heard that before. I thought that was cool. Thought I would share it whether you care or not. But this is what it looks like. If you have two boxes, double brood box, In the middle of the winter time, if you were to crack open the center, this is what you would find. That's the cluster, as they are partly in the lower box and partly in the upper box, and they're clustered together. That's a really, really good-looking cluster of bees for wintertime. And so don't necessarily recommend doing that, especially when it's cold, when they are clustered. But I'm glad somebody did it so I could have a picture to show you. So what are the dangers? What are the things that bees struggle with to overcome through the winter? These are them. It's temperature, climate, moisture, varroa, a lack of food, and mice also can be a problem in the wintertime for our bees. So let's talk about each one of these real quick. Temperature changes. We're talking about those changes, and here in Arkansas, this is a hard place to raise bees. Compared to a lot of other places in the country and in the world, this climate it's hard because of the climate shifts and the temperature changes. To where you'll have really, really cold one day, you'll be really warm the next day, and it's really cold the next day. What's happening with our bees in the wintertime is if it's been really super cold and they're all clustered up and they've been that way for several weeks, maybe a month, and then all of a sudden we get a couple of days where we're in the 60s. And they come out and they're going to make cleansing flights. As they come out, they have to go to the bathroom as well. And they've been holding it for a while, so they come out and do cleansing flights. And then that night, it drops back down into the 20s. Well, those bees, when they come back in, a lot of times when they have scattered back out and then the temperature drops again, the place that they cluster is back right down here at the bottom again. In their minds, they're thinking we're going to start all over again. I had in my long hive up here, when we had, I went the day before that deep freeze that we had last spring. I went with my FLIR, my thermal camera, and I opened the top just through the inner cover boards that I have in there. I used my FLIR boy. It was a nice patch right in the center, just glowed gold. It was the heat that they were putting off. It would look great. But okay, they're in good shape. And so put the lid back down. The next day was pretty warm, and bees were out. And then that night's when we had that deep freeze hit. And my bees clustered right back in the middle of where there was no food. If you went 2 frames to the right or 2 frames to the left, it was all honey. It was full, both ways. There were about 19, maybe as many as 22 frames of honey, full, in that hive, in that long hive. And they clustered right in the middle where there was none. And after those few days of cold, they weren't able to survive. And so when I opened up my hive and all that cold was over, I had the cluster of bees that were sitting right in the middle of all that had all died. And so that's something when we're talking about climate and what the climate and weather does, there's nothing we can do. There's really not much that we can do with that. And it is what it is. It happens. This is your first year going through the winter, and you end up losing some hives through the winter, just know, so have all of the rest of us. And it's part of it, and you can't control all of it. And it's not that you did anything wrong necessarily, but it just sometimes it happens. Question a lot of times is, should I wrap my hives in anything, insulate them in any way? Any of you guys that have had bees for a while, anybody use any kind of wraps? Roy does.
I did 1 year.
1 year?
Didn't do any good.
Didn't do any good. Okay. Anybody else?
I did it 1 year.
Didn't do any good. In Arkansas, it's not going to do much good. And it can also kind of be a danger because you wrap your hives. If you're in the far north, a lot of those guys are wrapping them in black plastic so that the sun will help keep them a little bit warmer. If you did that in Arkansas, then it might keep them warm throughout that night and help a little bit, but the next day when it warms up to 70 degrees and the sun's shining on it, you're going to bake your bees. And so There's not a lot of guys in this area that I know that wrap their hives. And probably one of the biggest things I'd say, if you're able to do, is try to put up a windbreak. Not everybody even does that. But what's that?
Straw bales, that's what I've done before.
Yeah, if you can get some hay bales and stack up around them just to block the northern wind, that will help a lot. Just to keep the wind off the hives. But my hives are up here on the hill, right up on the top of the hill where the wind comes rolling over the hill. And I have never even put a windbreak of any kind up, and I've had really good winters. So just kind of one of those things. It can help if you're able to, but not necessarily something that is a requirement. Varroa, I think maybe this is one of the most deadly things now when it comes to our winters. Whether they're bees, we open up our hives in the spring and we've got a bunch of dead bees in the hive, or there's a lot of beekeepers open up their hives in the spring and there's no bees at all. They're gone, and they have completely fled and left. A lot of the time, from what they believe, is this probably has something to do with Varroa. It could be some other things. It could be another sickness. It could be something else that has just made them feel like this isn't a good place to be right now. But Varroa probably has a lot to do with it. If you did not have your Varroa levels at a good level before you go into winter, you're going to have problems. It's just going to happen. It might not be something, they might survive the winter, but if those levels are really high going into spring, they've already started weak going into the next year. And so testing and treating is critical in the fall, no matter how you do it. It's critical to make sure that you have Varroa levels that are in a good place. Your mite count should be 3% or less. And it should be less than 3%, which means less than 3 mites per 100 bees. And when we do our testing, we test with a half cup of bees, which is about 300 bees. And so if you have more than 9 or more, you've got a mite problem, and you've got to do something about it, especially this time of year. And this is why. This is the rate of the increase of the number of bees in your hive. That's the gold line. So as our bees, you see here going up into summer, about middle of June, July, is at the peak. It's at the, what's it called? Summer solstice, which is what, June 21st? There is a natural something that happens about that time of year where the queen actually will begin to start slowing down some of her laying. Doesn't happen with all of them all the time, but it is kind of an overall time when we start to see some of that happening. So that's when our bee numbers begin to decrease, but it's when our bee numbers start decreasing, September, October, this time of year right now, our mite levels, that's when they go to their highest. And so they are, as the number of bees drop, there's less bees in the hive to manage the Varroa, and the Varroa then just spike. And so that's why this time of year is very important to make sure that we're dealing with our mite issues. Varroa are a huge problem. Moisture in your hive is a big issue. Ventilation. How many use upper entrances? Okay. Do you use them year-round or just in the winter? Year-round?
I got a screened off where you can't, nothing can get in.
Okay, so it's just vented. My Apame hives that I use, they're vented already. And so in the winter though, ventilation is important. And you'll hear from different beekeepers different ideas. There'll be some that'll say they don't vent at all, they just let it be. There are some that leave their screen bottom boards on all winter long. Do you do that, Jeff? Some people don't change those out at all. And some people will change from the screen bottom to a solid bottom just to keep a little bit more of the the wind and the air out. But as you see, we've got beekeepers that have done a little bit of everything who've been successful. And so it's just going to kind of be a preference and kind of learning what's going to work best for you. But ventilation, one thing, ventilation, if you don't have some type of a vent toward at the top of your hive, one thing that you can do is take that inner cover, that wooden inner cover, turn it upside down so that little notch that's in it is down, and then that allows not only air to get out and moisture to get out, but it also creates an upper entrance. And in the wintertime, a lot of beekeepers will actually do this to create an upper entrance, just in case the bottom entrance gets blocked by any bees that have died during the winter and fallen in the bottom floor of the hive and block the entrance, that gives them a higher entrance to be able to get in and out. Or snow, if it's covered with snow. And that's something if it snows, it's important to get out there, get the snow off of your landing boards. But ventilation in any way that you can is important. Kind of a side note here as well is it might be, for that same reason I was just talking about, a good idea to turn your entrance reducer upside down. Reason for is with it upside down, it gives a little bit more room for if there are some dead bees that get in the bottom of the hive during the winter, that they don't block that entrance, at least until it piles up a little bit more. It gives you a little bit more time to get in there with a tool, coat hanger, something to get in there and scrape out any of those dead bees that might be in there. You don't want that to get clogged up to where they can't get in and out. Moisture absorption. Quilt boxes. Raise your hand if you use quilt box of any kind. Sean does. Y'all do. Okay, quilt boxes. Just another box that's got, some people just put burlap in it, put wood chips in it, moisture from the bees. And the moisture is, remember, it's warm in there. And as they breathe, they're exhaling moisture, and just the humidity and everything else that's in there. When that moisture collects on the top of the hive, on the inside, because the top on the outside is cold, so you're going to get the condensation on the bottom of the lid or the outer cover, and when that condensation sets on that cover, if it begins to drip onto the cluster, then you're going to your bees are going to suffer from they're going to freeze because of the cold water. And there are a lot of beekeepers who've lost their hives over the winter because moisture dripping on their cluster.
That's my biggest problem.
Is it? So these are important because it's got a screen on the bottom so that the moisture can go up through the bottom. It goes up through the wood chips. It still collects at the top on that lid, but when it drips into the wood chips and soaks it up. Or into, it's called a quilt box because you might put some kind of material in there that would soak it up as well. So another thing that helps is to tilt your hives. If you just tilt the back of your hive up, put I've got a 2x4 up there that I'd stick underneath mine. You probably don't have to do them quite that high. But what that does then is when that moisture collects on the top, then it will run to the front of the hive and run down the front instead of sit in the middle and drip. And so just another help to try to help in any way that you can.
Did you say you use a 2x4?
Yeah. Turned on its side, not,
Yeah.
yeah. Which most...
Inch and a half, not 3.5.
Yeah. Yeah, it's raising it up about 1.5 inches in the back. Mountain camp method. How many of you guys have used mountain camp method? Okay, mountain camp method, if you're not sure what that is, what we're doing is we're putting a piece of newspaper over the top of the frames of our hives. I did this with all of mine last winter, had great success with it. We're just dumping dry sugar on top of that paper. You notice there's a little bit of room around the edges so the bees have room to get up around that. But when it's all done, you have something that looks about like that. And what this is doing is, one, it's providing winter food through the sugar, but it's also providing a moisture absorption. And if you've done mountain camp, after just a few days, you can go back out and you've got a crust that's already formed on the top of the sugar because the moisture from the bees has already starting to soak into it. And now some people that do this, their bees don't like it. And you'll have some beekeepers that'll say, I went back out the next day and it looked like it snowed out in front of my hive because the bees were just dragging sugar out and dumping it out. One thing sometimes that they'll do is take a water bottle and just spray the top of that sugar a little bit and go ahead and give it a little bit of a crust so that they can't start dragging it out, just the dry granules like that so quick. But this worked really well for me this last year, and they got into it and used it quite a bit. So we're talking about food. Lack of food is definitely a killer of our bees in the wintertime. So feeding in the fall is the key. We want to make sure that they have enough honey that is stored up, even if it's honey from our sugar water, funny honey from our sugar water, that is going to help them have enough resources to get through. I've heard anywhere, guys say anywhere from 80 to 100 pounds is what you want to be in your hive when you're going into winter. And so I'll tell you, it's a really cool little tool. Any of you ever used one of those luggage scales that it's about this size. You hold in your hand, it's got a little hook that comes down off of it, and hook it on your luggage and lift it up to see if you're going to get charged anymore when you get to the airport or not. And it tells you how much it weighs. That works really good with your hives. You hook it up under the back of your hive. When it's as heavy as at its heaviest, you lift it up, see what the weight is. You're not getting the full weight, obviously, because you're just tipping it. But you get a number that tells you, okay, that's how much it is. So throughout the winter, I'm able to go and check and see how fast are they depleting the food stores that are in there. Until it starts getting really light, then I know I've got to do something else to help them out. And so I might need to provide some of that emergency food, like we talked about a second ago, the mountain camp method, dry sugar on top. There are also using fondant. Fondant is really nothing other than that same dry sugar that we have just made into cakes or into patties, and that we set out on top of the hives inside. You're doing this, you probably need some kind of a shim that's going to go around the top of your hive to give a little bit of space for the fondant to sit in there. But the purpose of it, and they cannot use dry sugar unless they have water. And they are not able to process it unless they have water. And so if it is really cold and they are stuck inside there, if they don't have moisture inside the hive to be able to use to break down that sugar, then they can't use it. So no matter what you do to put it there, if they're not able to use it, then there's just nothing that can be done. That's not your fault. That's just kind of the way things have worked. Candy boards. I have used candy boards. This is the first one I ever made. It's the same thing. It's just I used about 2x1s and made a shim kind of around, put 1/2-inch wire underneath it, and I put parchment paper underneath on top of that to pack my sugar down onto, and it worked really well. They ate that thing up that year, and so I was glad that I had it. That's what we're going to be doing November 6th, is we're going to be going through in our field day, working on making fondant, how to do it, making sugar candy boards like this, and so come and be a part of that if you're able to. I do recommend this with a candy board. Is I took a couple of paint stirrers and laid across the hive, because I didn't want that laying just flat on top of the frames themselves. I gave them a little bit of room to be able to move underneath that candy board. Might not be in something that's necessary, but something that I did. But also, you can hardly see it. I also cut a little groove, right there in the bottom of the box. And that gave a place for ventilation. So, and that's what all of these, what I did was I stuck a matchbox. When I was packing the sugar in, I stuck a matchbox in those three places. So I have a way that the moisture could come up and circulate, air could circulate all the way through that if it needed to. And with an exit to be able to get out of the top of the hive as well. So there are a lot of different ways the guys do that. I saw this on YouTube and copied another guy, his method. Mice, if you've had mice in your hive and you know how much of a mess it is, the beehive is the perfect home for a mouse. It's warm because the bees keep it warm, and it's got food. There's sugar, and they'll eat the sugar up. But they will nest inside a beehive, so in order to keep them away, we have mouse guards, and there are about 1,000 different kinds of mouse guards out there that you can buy or that you can make yourself. I think that's half-inch screen, and if I'm not mistaken, a mouse can get through half-inch screen. I would use quarter-inch screen. Can't use 1/8 inch. The bees can't get through it, but you could use a quarter-inch screen. And I even used some of these on when I built my my long hive, and they're just a mouse guard that's built in, and you're able to adjust the opening on it anytime you want to. They're kind of handy. I kind of like them. But that is for the most part most of the problems and issues that you're going to deal with that you've got to be looking ahead for. And like I said at the beginning, just a little bit of prep can make a big difference. And I put that picture up there for that reason that was mentioned a moment ago, just to remind me to say something about if the snow is on your landing boards and covering up the entrances, make sure you get out there and knock that snow off. Give them a way to get out. I don't know when the last time it was that we had snow like that in northwest Arkansas. I guess a few years ago we had some pretty big snows, but I would love to see snow like that. That's the way it was when I was growing up in western Kansas every year. But if you have any questions or anything, don't ever hesitate to ask. Any of you guys have any other suggestions or recommendations too?
When do you stop feeding the 2-to-1 sugar water?
When do you stop? Typically, they say when you've got temperatures that are dropping below freezing. So when you
give it to them right up until then?
I have. Any other thoughts or ideas on that? What other guys do? Is that about right? Getting close to that time when you've got temperatures that are dropping down into freezing, or maybe it is at night, but when you're around that temperature, it's getting pretty cold. Part of it is because of the way that they're able to process it and store it once it gets that cold.
Yeah, because my thoughts are if you take it right up to the freezing point, they're not gonna have time to make it into funny honey or anything else. It's just gonna be sugar water.
Well, and they might not cap it, and that's okay. Even if it's not processed and dehydrated down to be able to cap, that's okay. You want them to have as much of it done that way as possible, because that's going to eliminate some of the additional moisture in the hive. But
Even if it's uncapped, it eliminates moisture.
if they've dried it out, if they've got it dried out, then you don't really have to worry about it too much. But there's a lot of times going late in the year that they'll be storing a lot of it up that never gets capped. And any other thoughts? Anything that I missed or you guys think of? I said there's 100 more things that we could add to a lot of this stuff, and you talk to any number of beekeepers, you get all kinds of different ideas. But
Has anybody tried the moisture boards, the home soap moisture boards?
I have not.
I bought some last year, but this will actually be my first year using them.
Those are the ones that are kind of like an inner cover that absorbs it on the cover itself.
Yeah.
I have not. Anybody else?
I'm wondering if I should leave the inner cover off and use that as an inner cover.
Well, even either way, you should get absorption as moisture goes up through the inner cover, at least through that hole in the inner cover. Should. You might not get as much just because you'll still have some room on the rest of that inner cover for the moisture to collect. But it should keep the condensation down as well because the inner cover should not be getting as cold if you have some kind of insulation on top of it. So.
I did it all. I candy board, foam syrup, wood chips, everything, because moisture is my biggest problem.
Yeah, do whatever it takes.
Right.
Whatever it takes, whatever works for you.
Could you tell the difference that year you did the mountain camping, you mixed a little pollen sub in?
They didn't touch the pollen.
I didn't.
I heard from some guys to mix in a little bit of pollen substitute with my dried sugar, just to give them a little bit of protein through the winter. And they went through that whole thing and pulled out the sugar and didn't touch the pollen. They didn't want it.
I thought you weren't supposed to give them pollen in the winter, that they need carbohydrates.
Well, they do, but you don't. They do still need some protein, which they're going to get in through some of their honey, and they've got also. Let me back up to that. They have pollen stored
Yes.
in the hive going into winter, and even in this. What was it? Even in this picture here, I know it's just an illustration drawn, but all the dark is supposed to represent pollen. And what it says, or you can't hardly read it, but what it talks about over here is a lot of times they will store pollen under honey. They'll put honey on top of pollen as they store it. One, it gives them the pollen resources when they need it to start brood rearing in the spring. But they do use some pollen as through the winter at times. And that was really the reason for that, was to give them a little bit, mainly to store it up if they were in need of it going into the spring. But I use an open pollen feeder anyway, so if they needed it, they would go get it. So I won't ever do
The
that.
winter patties and the pollen patties, you give them the pollen patties in the spring and the winter patties, but my understanding is there's no pollen in the winter patties.
Yeah, I've never used them, so it's again, it's just another one of those resources that they provide to be able to give them a little extra boost when they need it. Anything else? All right. If not, then are we drawing a number back there, Jamie? If you bought a ticket or tickets,
Pot's $40, so $20 to the winner tonight.
$20 for the winner tonight.
Anybody else before I draw?
Anybody put $20 in? You break even?
All right, the last four are 9408.
9408.
9408.
Bingo. All right. Winner. All right. Thank y'all for coming and being here tonight. I hope this was helpful. I know some of you that you've been in this rodeo for several years. A lot of this isn't new, but for those that are newer, hopefully this helped a little bit. Maybe there's some ideas or thoughts that you hadn't done or seen before. And if you ever have any questions, getting ready to go into things happening here in the winter, never hesitate to let us know. We're here to help you out.
I've been as high as 12.
What's that?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Starting, I'm hoping within the next few weeks to get memberships transferred over on the website. When I do, those of you that are already members, you'll receive an email from us on the website, so you can go in and set up your password. It'll come from the Benton County Beekeepers. It'll have a link in there to go in and set up your own password. Those members from
earlier in the year, when we were doing the calendar year memberships, will end on December 31st. You'll get an email about the 1st of December, reminder is up for renewal. Whenever you renew, it'll bump it to December 31st of 22. Even if you do it on December 1st, you'll still get a full 365 days added onto it. Those that start joining now, we're gonna start putting in when you join as your renewal date. So instead of doing the calendar year, like we have been in the past, whenever you renew or sign up, you'll get 365 days. That way, if you wait to sign up till March, you're not getting shortchanged by only getting 9 months instead of the full 12. You'll get a full 12-month membership, and then we'll hoping to get it set up where, like, if you want to use the honey extractor, you go online and sign in, and there's a form, name, address, when you want it, and I think we've been doing it set up where basically east and west side of the county. John has the west side. Patrick currently has the one on the east side, but he hit me up the other day about me taking it because he's been so busy. But it'll email whichever one you want. You fill out the form for that person. It'll email them. They'll get back in touch with you to set up when to get it. And then I'm trying to get a forum set up on it, members on the forum, so we can go in and post, hey, I got this, do some equipment for sale or whatever. We can do for sale, we can do just questions, anything you find interesting, post it on there. Just some way to maybe interact more besides just in the meetings. And then we're looking at putting more stuff on there all the time, more benefits for the members as well. So